this can be found in your 4012, tab A. There are three things that we need to consider in who must file. That's filing status, and there are 5 of them, age, and gross income. Okay. Again, that's filing status, age, and gross income. And we'll talk about these in great detail, believe me, throughout the course. Okay, if you look on page 4012, A-3, you'll see a chart. I indicated that there were 5 filing statuses: single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household, and qualifying spouse. Married filing separately, don't worry about it because it's out of scope. We do not do those types of tax returns at our sites. But if you are single and you're under age 65, then that's the amount, $13,850. 65 or older, $15,700. Married filing jointly, under 65, those are the amounts. 65 or older, those are amounts, because age you get an additional standard deduction, and we'll talk about that with age. Married filing separately, it says any age, $5, but don't worry about that. Head of household, under 65, $20,800. 65 or older, $22,650. Qualifying spouse, and we'll talk about that a little later, what that means. Under 65, $27,700. 65 or older, $29,200. Those are the income thresholds, if you will. Who must file? And that is on 4012 A-4. You must file a return if any of the following apply. Your unearned income was over $3,100, $4,950 if 65 or older. Your earned income was over $15,700, $17,550 if 65 or older, and blind. And we don't want you won't memorize all of these, but you will know where to find it in your textbook. You must file a return if you're under 65 and not blind. Remember, I said age is one of the criteria to determine whether you must file. So these are the various criteria or guidelines. If you're under 65 and not blind, if you're over 65 or older or blind, because again, you get an additional amount for age and being blind. Under age 65 and not blind, those are the amounts. Your unearned income was over $1,250. Your earned income was over $13,850. And you said, unearned income, earned income, what does that mean? And we're going to tell you in the course material. Okay? So if you want to take a look at that chart again, but again, we don't expect for you to memorize this, just to know where to find it. Okay? And there are some situations where taxpayers that do not fall into the previous guidelines, they still may have to file a tax return. And A is alternative minimum tax, but that's out of scope for us. Additional tax on a qualified plan. Household employees are out of scope for us. Social Security and Medicare tax on tips that were not reported to your employer. Recapture of the first first-time home buyers credit. These are some of the areas where you might be required to file a tax return and you didn't file into any of those other guidelines. For instance, if you're self-employed and you have a net profit of $400 or more, you must file, even though you did not meet those previous income levels that we mentioned. But as you get into the course material, you'll learn more about these. And again, you can find these in your 4012, page A-5 through 6. Some other instances when you might have to file a tax return is if you withdraw some money from your IRA and you weren't 59 and a half. We talked about the first-time buyer's credit, the HSA funds that are required to be reported as income, and you used it for other than medical services. But again, we will talk about that. And the one that I really want to point out to you is the Form 1095-A, and that's under the Affordable Health Care Act. We see some taxpayers, and that form has a significant impact on the tax return because if they file the tax return and they don't include the 1095-A, then we get what we call rejects, and we definitely don't want to reject. And what is a reject? A reject is when the return cannot be processed based on the information that we input. You know, sometimes Social Security numbers or transposed or something, and that's something that, you know, we have control over. Sometimes dependents have already been claimed by someone else, which, you know, you may not know that information. But rejects, we really don't like them, and we really try to keep them to a minimum. If we can help. Okay. And this is also in your 4012. Chart D, who should file? You know, sometimes you don't have a filing requirement, but withholdings have been taken out of your check. So you want to file to get those withholdings back. Sometimes you might want to claim the American Opportunity Credit, and we'll talk about that as we get more into the course material. But these are some instances where you should file. If you have a refundable American Opportunity Credit, you're getting the Earned Income Tax Credit, you qualify for the Premium Tax Credit. But right now, these may not mean a whole lot to you, but as we get into the course, you'll understand why we say these taxpayers should file, even though they do not meet the age income test. Okay, any questions at this point? Okay, let's take a look at what we have learned. We're going to give you a few poll questions. All right, so Lucy is 36 years old and single, and her gross income is $20,000. Is she required to file a tax return? I have made some notes. Any answers? All right, and why? Very good. Okay, that's poll question number 2. Henrietta and Javier are married and plan to file a joint return. Henrietta is 67 and had gross income of $11,000 for the tax year. Javier is 66. His gross income was $5,000 for the year, or they required to file a tax return. And why not?
Because together they don't make the minimum amount except.
Absolutely, absolutely. Guys, I'm impressed.
He's one of the one that did taxes already.
Okay, let's take a look at our next poll question. Janet and Harry are married, filing jointly, and live together all year. During the tax year, she turned 66 and he turned 64. Their gross income was $19,800. Based only on this information, are they required to file a tax return? Look at your chart. How many say no? No. We got any yeses? Well, no's are right. Okay. And why? It's below the threshold. And what would be the threshold for? Look at your chart. What? 29,200. Very good. You get a gold star. Okay. Number 4, Bob is 27 years old. His gross income was $17,000 during the tax year. Based only on this information, is he required to file a tax return? Yes. Why? It's above the threshold. And what is the threshold? Very good. Okay, this is our last poll question for this part of the course material. Juanita has a dependent child and can file as a qualifying widower. She is 47 years old. Her gross income was $27,000. Based only on this information, is she required to file a tax return? No. And why not? It's below the threshold. And what is the threshold? Absolutely. Guys, y'all are batting 100. Okay.